Infrastructure is the internal framework for a country that allows its economy and its citizens to be productive and healthy. But what happens when a country allows that infrastructure to crumble and fall apart and doesn't make the necessary investments? I'm Christine Grail with Leica Geosystems, here today on HXGN TV to talk about the need for investment in a modern infrastructure is CGLA CEO Norman Anderson. Welcome, Norm.
Hey, thank you very much.
So Norm, your organization, the stated mission of CGLA Infrastructure is to support the doubling of global infrastructure investment by 2020. Why do you believe this is so important?
Well, it's unbelievably important. One of the big problems we have globally is that we don't invest enough in infrastructure at all. That's a problem because it's hard to grow if you don't invest in infrastructure, but the other issue is the global economy is not growing at all right now. So really there are only two ways to restart global growth. One of them has to do with what they call helicoptering money into people's pockets, and people aren't going to spend that money now because the economy is shaky. What you really have to do is reinvest in infrastructure and make significant investments, and we call it strategic infrastructure, right? Because these are investments that people are going to be making for 30 or 40 years. It's a big deal, it's a big decision.
Now, when most people think of investing in infrastructure, they think of fixing bridges and building new highways. That's not exactly what you're talking about, though, is it?
Well, we're talking about a lot of different things, right? So one of them is a much more expanded definition of infrastructure. So not just bridges and highways, not just metro systems, obviously water and wastewater. You've seen all of those issues in the U.S., but also anything having to do with moving electrons, right, and producing electrons. So there's a whole new field of microgrid technology, battery storage in the U.S., anything having to do with electricity, natural gas. But the bigger issue is that one of the problems and one of the opportunities has to do exactly with what Hexagon's involved in terms of technology, right? Because we don't actually need to think too much about old infrastructure and fixing that. Some of that needs to happen, but there's a whole new possibility, technology wave in terms of the kinds of infrastructure we need, the kinds of infrastructure that's going to make the world competitive, and the kinds of infrastructure that's going to create the kinds of jobs that we want to see. So when I think about infrastructure investment, I don't think about masses of construction workers. They're going to be construction workers. They're going to be software engineers. They're going to be data analysts. All sorts of people. When you think about 32 billion sensors on buildings around the world by 2030, you think about driverless vehicles. You think about a whole different set of infrastructure realities than we have right now. Absolutely critical for us to get in front of that.
Absolutely. So in a recent op-ed piece, you said great infrastructure changes everything because it brings everyone together, takes us all somewhere together, and tells us in the way that only public symbols can who we are as a country. What is your vision for what great infrastructure should be?
That's obviously a great question because I care about it. If you look at infrastructure from the 1930s, you have these fantastic iconic buildings, right? From the Golden Gate Bridge as a structure, Penn Station in New York, Grand Central in New York, Washington's Union Station. Phenomenal, right? What that tells people is gives people hope, gives people a sense that we're going someplace. They're actually beautiful buildings. They function really well as well. That's the kind of thing you need. If you have infrastructure that's, as you mentioned, broken down, that tells citizens way more than they need to know about their government and the quality. I mean, it really is a direct reflection on the quality of government, and how competent the country is as a country. So you've got to come up with different kinds of ways of thinking about infrastructure. For instance, mass transit stations. You've got to think about how do you make those beautiful? How do you make those super functional? How do you create real activities and opportunities in those places? Because that really tells people a lot about who they are and what their government thinks about them and what their government thinks they can be. Better airports, better high-speed rail stations that actually provide some leadership in terms of how people think about themselves. And then we look at emerging markets, and we look at one of the areas in which there's been absolutely no progress in 25 years, which is wastewater treatment. That has a huge impact on children's health, on their ability to go to school, on hospitals, costs of hospitals, women's health, women's ability to work. All of these issues absolutely critical for us to be healthy as a society.
You are so right, but I'm thinking about the price tag. And I think that you've said something to the effect of 24 trillion is not enough. And that's a huge price tag. So how do we pay for this?
Well, one of the big issues that, and I gave a talk a little while ago upstairs on this issue, has to do with the fact that we don't think about infrastructure right anymore, right? So the way we've been thinking about infrastructure is a real top-down structure, mostly paid by taxes. And then we tried to transfer that into public-private partnerships, privatizations, et cetera. What you really have to do is think about users. You have to think about all the people who benefit from infrastructure and engaging them in the process. That's one of the things that I find most fascinating. Really, where do we think additional infrastructure investment is going to come from now? It has to come from our savings. It has to come from pension funds. How do you convince people to invest in infrastructure? Their savings in infrastructure from around the world, those have to be good investments. Those have to be investments with returns. That's the kind of thing you have to do. You've got to figure out how to structure it in a way that really works for people. And people ought to be able to invest both their savings and obviously they ought to be able to invest in a fixed income way directly in projects and get dividends on a regular basis. But there are some other issues that are really important as well. Most countries have a tremendous amount of public infrastructure assets that they have no business owning. The U.S. has $7 trillion in public infrastructure assets. We spend about $150 billion a year on new infrastructure. There's zero reason why we shouldn't sell that or lease that to private sector operators. Infrastructure is a public good. Government needs to make sure that it's operated as a public good, but that doesn't mean that government needs to own and operate this stuff. They're two different issues. So that's where the money comes from. It comes from coming up with better structures that better take advantage of the creativity of human beings. Again, because of technology, you can imagine an infrastructure in which users are also the designers of infrastructure, also have selected which projects are most important, and those are the ones that they're going to use more. And they're also investors in those projects as well, direct investors in those projects. Why not if it's a good project?
You make some excellent points, and it's really something that we all need to start thinking about right now. The sooner the better.
I agree.
So you've identified some very specific benefits of making substantial investments in modern infrastructure. If your vision is realized over the next decade, what kind of results can we expect to see?
Well, I think you get huge results, right? Because what you're really talking about is the same kind of building boom that we saw around the world up until about 1980 in terms of coming up with new kinds of structures that benefit people, new ways to finance those structures. You'd be looking at, for instance, in the U.S., something on the order of $4 trillion in investment over the next 10 years, let's say, and 4% GDP growth, so increases rather than decreases in average household income. It also would provide the kind of growth foundation for countries in Latin America like Brazil and Argentina to actually weather commodity changes, changes in the price of oil, that kind of thing, as they made not just significant investments in infrastructure, but we're able to use those investments, utilize those investments to export more successfully, higher value added, cheaper prices to global markets, to better interact with the global economy. Same arguments for Europe. You really have to think about infrastructure as the critical and long-term investment to generate competitiveness and growth.
And it really is. Now, your organization, CGLA, is serving as an advocacy group for these types of issues, correct? And
right.
How can people, is there a way for people to get involved, or is there a way for them to
Sure.
tap into the strengths of your organization?
No, thanks very much. I appreciate it. We do three things that are really useful for people. One of them is we identify the top 100 projects each year globally, Latin America, and the U.S., and we hold three different events. They're called strategic leadership, infrastructure leadership forums, where we bring people together. We just had one last week for about 700 people in Argentina. People came from all over the world and all over Latin America. The second thing that's really interesting is we have a new digital platform. It's called GVIP, and we invite everybody from all over the world in the infrastructure community to participate in the platform, and it really allows people, as I was saying earlier, to crowdsource, to be participants in crowdsourcing projects, ideas for making projects better, like Elon Musk is doing with his Hyperloop, and also investment in projects. So it's a way to bring the best expertise in the world down to the local level when people need that investment. So super interesting. And then the third initiative we have, which is really interesting as well, everything we do is really interesting, is called Blueprint 2025, and it's to build an infrastructure plan for the next administration, whoever takes office on December 20th, on January 20th, 2017. And the idea there is we've put together 50 CEOs from around the country and 50 heads of public agencies from around the country to design an infrastructure plan. We have 10 what we call action themes and 18 specific recommendations that we're building out for the transition team in Washington and the candidates' transition teams.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to following your progress and seeing the results from that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you. For more information about CGLA, visit cg-la.com. You can watch additional episodes of HXGN TV at hxgntv.com. Thank you for watching.